Hello and welcome to the Made for More video series. I am your host, Jade Stoner, and in this mini series, along with my guests, we're going to be getting into some of the things that are really going to help you to elevate your life from the inside out so that you can create the life that you want and the one your soul is calling you to, and not just the life that you settled for. So today I'm joined by the amazing Angel Abitha Chi, who is a shamanic healer, channeler, award-winning coach, amongst other things, and she facilitates inner child work and healing traumas on human, generational, and soul level, which is exactly why I invited her onto this series. So welcome, Angel.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being here. So this series is very chill. You know, you and I talk a lot. We have some great conversations. We get into all of the things. So I have an idea of what I want this to be about. So this particular video is called Be Your Wildest. I mean, go be your wildest if you want to be. Be your ancestors' wildest dreams. So I really want to get into today some of the deeper healing. I think healing and trauma are kind of buzzwords at the moment, which is great for individual healing and collective healing. And I know you know way more than me. It goes way deeper than that. It's not just about you in this lifetime. It's not just about your stuff. Like, there's a whole lot more. And like I say, I know a lot, but you are the person. You are the shamanic healer. You are all of the things that, by the way, I'm going to leave all of Angel's details in the show notes. Not the show notes, it's not a podcast, in the video description. So you can find out everything that she does and all about her services and all of the things. And I'm also aware that we might end up somewhere else. You know, we are just the channels and the vessels, and whatever's going to come out of this conversation over the next hour or so is what's going to come out. So I'm just going to trust it and roll with it.
Yes. Yes.
So how long have you been doing your healing?
Wow. So I am 55 now, and I first went into counseling at the age of 27.
Wow.
So it's half of my lifetime or more than. Yeah, and it's been a very long journey, but it's been a journey that has been so worth it. So worth it.
Okay, so just very briefly, because I know there's a lot in between, but just share, like, what was life like for you at 27 before you started on this journey compared to like where it is now? What is the
Right.
healing done for you? What's the value in it? Why should people bother?
Why should they bother? Okay, because the difference is that I remember in my earlier years, I always felt like there was just this dark cloud over me, just following me everywhere I went. And because I time travel, what I've just said, I'm actually feeling it, if that makes sense. And I feel quite sad for that person that I used to be. And I was constantly depressed, lots of anxiety, and I just didn't really know who I was. And I just existed with so many problems and struggling to have solutions to the problems. Yeah, I was half the person I am now. So now it's like, whoa, who is this woman? Because it just feels so different. I'm confident, I'm happy. Yes, I have ups and downs like everybody else. Yes, I've been through the dark night of the soul a few times, but I always look at these things with a positive outlook. It's for my soul growth, it's for my learning, it's for my ascension. And I go through with courage and boldness. And I am a wild woman, I'm a sensitive soul, I'm a very sensitive soul. And that's something that's been really hard to come to terms with because when I was young, I used to be teased about how sensitive I am. You know, my family members would say, "Oh, you just have to look at Yvonne and Angel." So my name used to be Yvonne, right? So back then I was Yvonne. Now I'm Angel, and they used to say this: you just have to look at her, and she will start crying. And literally, it was that case. I cried a lot, but I realized that my tears are very much messages from my soul, and I now accept the person as I am as a sensitive soul. I feel so much. Even like now, we were talking about the solstice and the Schumann resonance of the earth is shifting, and I'm really feeling that in my body right now. So the sensitivity, I've embraced it, and it's actually my superpower. That's why I love working with sensitive souls, because it's about really embracing it. It is our superpower. So those are some of the differences.
Like there's a lot there. I loved what you said. My tears are messages from my soul. That is so beautiful. I shared on one of my podcast episodes, how we're taught to not to cry and to suppress stuff, especially for men. Boys don't cry. Man up when you're talking to a 6-year-old. They're a child. They're 6. Like,
Yeah.
And females, kind of got to be strong and got to do all the things. But actually, our emotions come up for a reason. And when we suppress them, when we stop ourselves from crying and don't process that emotion gets stuck inside of us. And you do that lots and lots over time, you can see how that can manifest into something bigger, which actually, as the words are rolling off of my tongue, I'm realizing that could go in a whole nother direction of a conversation.
Yeah.
But I wanted to pick up on, so somebody watching this, a lot of the people that come into my world are people that feel like there's more to life. They feel like there's something, but they're not quite sure what. There's like this feeling, they don't know quite what it is. So you've shared how you were very sensitive and you felt this stuff. So for someone who's perhaps not as aware of what that stuff is, perhaps even as you were back when you were 27, what does that look like? What does that feel like? I'm sitting here, I'm watching this, and I have these things. How would I know, like, that's kind of the thing for me?
There'll be a sense of dissatisfaction, a sense of there's more to life than this. There just has to be. Sometimes I remember my soul would cry out. If I was still enough, and my soul would say something, and I'd be like, huh? And I'd listen and get the help that I needed. But because there was a time when I was so busy doing, I had both my children by the time I was 27. I was also partying a lot because I'd left the religion that I grew up in. I was a Jehovah's Witness, and it felt like freedom. So I was doing a lot of partying. So I wasn't still much, but there were certain times, like when I used to come home from a night out and the next morning I had a hangover, and I just felt, I think I had a good time, but right now I just feel dissatisfied. Like, this ain't it. This ain't it.
Yeah. And do you know what? You picked up on something really key, like that stillness. And very much now in 2023, like there's so much going on. There's so much noise coming at us from all directions. And I feel like a lot of people do have these kind of feelings and they ignore it because they're not still for long enough, or they hear it and because it's uncomfortable for them, they don't really know what it is. They then look to move it like very, very quickly because they haven't been taught to sit with it and hold it and to look at it and see what it's trying to tell them. So then they're always busy. You see that in people that are always in the gym or always working, or perhaps they drink in excess or they're out in excess. They're never in their house. Like they're always out on the street, like you don't have a home. It's just like, go sit down and chill. And that is one of the things that I think was really, really powerful about 2020, because those kind of people who were always finding an excuse to be on the run, suddenly the universe was like, bitch, please, sit down, keep still. You're telling me you don't have time? Here is plenty of time. Go sit, go figure your shit out. And, because one of my things is that the universe is elevating too. Like, it's not just about us individually, it's about the universe as a collective as well. It wants us to elevate and rise up. It wants us all to do better. And that's all a part of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, but those moments where you are not being still. And the thing is, the stillness is very much the divine feminine energy. And we know that for centuries, the divine feminine energy has been suppressed in so many different ways. We live in a very patriarchal society. And we are taught, you have to do this, you have to get on with this, you have to do this, you have to keep moving, you have to so where do we have time for the feminine energy, that nurturing, that that wise, that intuition, that energy, being still? Do you know that when a woman has a moon cycle, for the first couple of days, she shouldn't really be doing anything? They say that we have premenstrual syndrome or tension, or we get moody during our periods. Okay. That is the time when things come to the surface. If we're still, we will be able to deal with them. But
Okay.
because we don't deal with them, and we just keep going, and we just keep putting things on top of one another instead of dealing with them as and when they come up to the surface. So this divine feminine energy is so important for us to embrace. It's a very powerful energy because it connects us to source.
Okay. Absolutely. And I just want to say that for all you guys listening, this applies to you as well. You have feminine energy in you too.
That's it. Absolutely. Men have 40% feminine energy.
Okay, I always thought it was 30. So women had 70% feminine, 30% masculine, and then vice versa for men.
Okay, my ratio was 60-40, but who knows?
Still,
I
it's
think it
both.
does differ from
Yeah.
person to person as well. Yes.
Yeah. And then masculine, feminine, that could be a whole nother conversation. I was also going to say, I know men don't bleed, but I do believe men have some kind of menstrual emotional cycle every month, because there comes a point that they be behaving like females when females are due on their period. So I feel like there is something, and I guess
Definitely.
from like a different perspective, because we're all like, what am I trying to say here? Like the moon cycles.
Mm-hmm.
We're all connected to that because we're 70% water, and the moon moves the water, and blah blah
Absolutely.
blah. So then again, from that perspective as well, men would also have like a moment in a month where they feel like whatever, but it's not very easy to stop, is it? Especially as there's still this kind of hustle culture. I mean, for me personally, I think I was very much a part of that. It was also deepened by being a solo parent. You have to do the things, the house doesn't run by itself, the child doesn't get to school by himself. These days he does, and also he doesn't, because he doesn't go to school anymore because he's aged out of the school system. Today's his first day at home, and he's like, I'm free. I'm like, yeah. So there's all of this stuff that's always like go go go. And also like for females, there's very much this alpha femme, but alpha femme like on the dark side. So I'm strong and I'm independent and I don't need no man and I can do it all by myself. I'm always like, oh yeah, I can do it all by myself too, but I don't want to. There's a difference between, there's an energetic difference behind it. Like, where is that kind of attitude coming from? And what I find is those kind of women are usually they're carrying a lot of hurt and pain. They've been hurt, their walls have gone up, and that's the thing. It's not that you don't need a man. If we like really dig it back and you were really truthful with yourself, you do want one, but you're scared because you've been hurt and because you're now protecting yourself. Which is where healing comes in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been married twice and divorced, and I've had 2 other serious relationships, and they have been painful. The breakups have been painful, but I'm not going to sit here and say I don't want a man now. I do. I would love my divine counterpart to come walking through the door. And it's because I have done the healing after each hurt. I've learned the lessons. And I always say to people, whenever a relationship breaks up, don't see it as a failure, see it as a lesson, see it as growth. What did you learn from each breakup? And heal your heart and nurture yourself to the point where you're now ready for the next adventure.
Yeah, and 100% agree. And I'm also aware that those things can be taken as a bit cliche, like, do the things, heal your heart. Like, what is that? Like, okay, how does your work do that? Or what did you do when you were healing yourself?
So, because obviously also I'm a counselor, and I've had counseling a lot. And so you look at, okay, what attracted me to that person? what was the relationship really like? So some of the things that I've learned is I was a people pleaser, and I lost myself in those relationships. I dumbed myself down in those relationships. And when it got to a point where I couldn't dumb myself down anymore, that's when the relationships started to flounder. So I've learned that when you enter a relationship, you go in as who you are, as who I am, as this powerful wild woman, this goddess that I am. Go in there straight away as that person. If they can't handle it, they can't handle it. But don't pretend to not be that person in the beginning. Be myself. Stop people pleasing. Put myself first. Have my life, have my goals, have my visions, and not cater to what this man needs. Not that I'm not going to be supportive and be nurturing in a relationship, but I'm going to look after myself, basically. I'm going to go in there as a whole person as opposed to somebody that needs a knight in shining armor. Women don't need knights in shining armors. We don't. We've been fed the lie that we're helpless women. We're not. We're powerful forces. So doing the work on self, I've also managed to really bring my own masculine and my own feminine into harmony so that my masculine can take care of my feminine and my feminine can take care of my masculine so that I am more whole when I get into a new relationship. So we've got to look at all the things that have caused the breakup, like the people pleasing and not feeling good enough, not feeling that I deserve, not allowing someone to control you, yeah, because the esteem is so low. All of these things I've worked on in myself to remove those threads of wounding that I had from childhood. So also grew up without my dad. So that's a father wound. I needed to heal that. The absent father wound is deep, So oftentimes women who have an absent father wound, they will attract men who are emotionally unavailable, sometimes physically unavailable, and they're trying to make that relationship work. They're trying to get this man to be emotionally available, and that's done on a subconscious level. When actually, what needs healing is the father wound, because you're trying to fix your father wound through this relationship, and it won't work.
Okay.
And also the mother wound, again, that's another one that's very, 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 very deep, because we come from our mothers. We were in our womb for 9 months. Healing that as well. There's so much.
There is so much. And I'm also thinking, so again, going back to somebody who may be watching this and isn't as far along their journey as you're, right? And, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, celebrate yourself for being on this journey.
Yes.
But how do I do that? Do I set an intention that I'm going to heal this father wound and then sit there and meditate and wait for it to like magically happen? Like, what do I need to do?
It doesn't happen by osmosis. So I always listen. The mere fact that you're a human and you're born into the human condition with all its dysfunction, its traumas and stuff, I recommend that every human being needs therapy. Have someone that can sit there with you with no judgments and help you explore your inner world and to help you see your blind spots. Because sometimes there's something called the Johari window, and it's about your blind spots. What can I see that you can't see, and that I can help you explore and heal? And there's so many other modalities as well. Sometimes the further you go along, sometimes talking therapy doesn't cut it anymore at that time. So then go and seek someone like myself who does spiritual healing so that we can really remove those blockages energetically, because we are all energy, and the blockages can be removed shamanically or even with Reiki or Sakem energy healing, so that you can then carry on to the next level. So there's so much, and meditation absolutely helps, because if you meditate, you're going to start to hear the silent whispers of your soul. And then that can inform you as to what needs doing, what needs healing, what do I need to look at next? Because it's a journey. It's not all going to happen at once.
It absolutely is a journey. So I'm working, well, I'm not working on it right now. It's up here, but it's been coming up for a while, and I want to write an article called "You Don't Need Therapy to Heal." And that's not to throw shade at therapy. It works. For me personally, I've never had therapy. My whole, so since 2010, my whole healing journey, it started off with personal development books. So very much mindset, very much like that hustle culture that I shared earlier that I'd gotten into. And that was, I feel like a lot of people are brought in at like a book level, like The Secret is like a huge one. And it's like the dangling carrot that the universe uses to like get you excited and get you on the path, because once you be knowing something, you can't unknow it. And then you just find yourself, you go more and more. So that's how mine started. And then coaching. And then, as you said, I found that the further along I've gone on the path, which is really about me being more ready and open, that's when I've been willing to look at the spiritual side of stuff more, the stuff that years ago I would have been like,
I remember.
So there's all of that. And I feel like it's really important to say, you know, just finding what works for you. I had this conversation with somebody last week. It's like everything out there works. You know, shamanic healing works, therapy works, tapping works, meditation works. Does that mean it works for everyone? No, you have to find what works for you. There is not a one size that fits all. You know, just because you did it one way, I did it another way, doesn't mean it works for everyone. And I think that's really about what this journey is about. It's coming home to you and trusting yourself. Your soul knows the way, right? So like you were saying, like when you're in meditation and you learn to listen to your inner voice and then trust that, because it tells you what's up. And whilst we're on the subject of healing, I want to look at the ancestral piece, because I feel like in this the times that we live in, where it is a lot about, you know, trauma's a buzzword, healing's a buzzword, and all the things. I've found on my journey, there came to a point where everything wasn't, I'd done everything, and then I found myself being frustrated, because I was like, I've done everything, like what else is there to do? And I heard my voice within me say, this is not your stuff. And you may recall that you and I have had this conversation. And you said, well, do you remember what you said? And I'll let you take it. It was all kind of the same direction. It would have been about like the ancestral thing. So what is
ancestors, right? So the ancestral continuum. So we all have many, many ancestors, okay? And sometimes when we're born, we come in with 75% of our parents' stuff. That's a lot of stuff that's not yours. So you're carrying it. It's in your DNA. So
that's epigenetics, right?
Yeah. And yeah. So so you have to look at, so you start to develop yourself with your 25% and all of that is yours. But then so for example, let me make it quite simple. If I was born with 75% of my parents' stuff, my parents, well, my mum, she experienced sexual abuse. Her mum, my on my dad's side, that's also part of his ancestors and his mum. So I'm carrying all of that. And then I also experienced it. Okay, because nobody in my family looked at it and healed from it. I was the one that decided it stops here. So I went on my healing journey and revealed those secrets. And it caused a lot of rift in my family because, you know, a lot of families, oh, you don't talk about those things, you just sweep them under the carpet. But for me, it was about speaking out boldly about it and healing from it. Because when you've experienced sexual trauma, it has a plethora of problems in relationships. So many. People don't realize. And so healing that is helping my ancestral lineage. So I'm my ancestors' wildest dreams. My ancestors love me dearly. I've been told this many times from hearing them, from other people that send their messages to give to me, because I've done so much healing. And so the more healing that you do, you affect the energetic strand of your ancestors, and they get healed. And it goes forward as well when you get your grandchildren and your children. So that's how we help our ancestors, by continually doing the healing work.
I love that. And what I heard in there is you broke the cycle.
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah, for me, that's what it's all about. You know, in my work as a spiritual life coach, my message is, you know, empowering you to live the life that your soul is calling you to. And you do that through breaking the cycles, healing, and creating inner success. And it is, I do believe that many of us are the ones, we are the cycle breakers.
Yes.
We're the ones that are, like you've said, been like, this shit stops with me, you know. And I read somewhere once, it says, you know, trauma can be passed through generations, or if trauma can be passed through generations, so can healing, you know.
Absolutely.
I think that's really important as well. You know, this work isn't just about us. It is about our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. It's also about collectively as a planet. And then you think like the ripple effects and the butterfly effect, and just you being in a, so kind of like to simplify it very much, is like you're in healing, you raise your vibration up.
Yeah.
And as you raise up, other people are going to be feeling that. They will do, it'll either encourage them to do the same, or it will make them repel from you.
Absolutely.
Because your light starts to irritate their demons and they don't want to do the work, and that's okay. You know, it's not, we're not here to tell anybody what to do. Healing is something you can't force anybody to heal, but that's why it's so important. And I feel like as well, understanding that ancestral bit, so what you've shared about your own journey and the sexual abuse, that's really powerful, because often in this world that I'm in, particularly around the law of attraction, and when you, a lot of people, their first thing is, when they've experienced something like sexual abuse, is saying, so you're telling me I attracted it to myself? And then it's very much shut down. And it's not that, it's not saying that.
No.
And I love how you shared, like you took back your power, really, and also said, we're not doing this shit anymore. It stops with me.
Yeah, absolutely. And and the thing is, the more you grow and the more your soul ascends, you start to see things from a spiritual perspective. It's like, and I feel like the way I see it is like my soul is up here and it's looking down, and it can understand why I experience certain things. You know, we have all come to experience different things, some not so good, some good. But in every experience, we are learning, we are growing, we are expanding. And if we can get to that, when we get to that point, it takes so much why me out of it. Because I remember back in the day, why me? Why did I have to go through this? I'm tough and I'm angry and I'm this. You know, not long ago, I had an experience in Zimbabwe, and it wasn't very nice. But I look at it, okay, my soul wanted that experience for a reason. But it's only when you get to a certain level you can have that understanding. And this is why it's so important to just take this journey slowly, with self-compassion, with nurturing ourselves, and don't beat ourselves up about certain things if we, you know, if things don't work out for us, or if we fall back and do something that we didn't want to do. Don't beat ourselves up. We're having an experience. We're all having an experience. And it is about, we just need to keep going so that our light gets brighter and brighter and brighter.
Yep, it's all soul growth. And also, I've heard a lot of wisdom in what you just shared, you know, again, going back to The Secret as an example, because that's what starts a lot of people off. And then they get all excited because, you know, they manifest something and they're like, oh, this manifestation stuff, it's great, it works. And then, you know, they carry on a little bit further, but they don't want to accept like the darker stuff as well. And it's like, it's all part of it. We're not just this or that, we're both. We're the dark and the light, we're the masculine, we're the feminine, we're the yin and the yang. And I used to be like that as well. You know, that's very much you move into ego and victim mode when things aren't going your way, when they didn't turn out the way that you think they did. And that's when you're like, fuck all this shit, I don't want to do this anymore, I'm leaving, I'm going to Narnia. And it's just like, looking back, I realized for me, they're all the things that tripped me up as well and kept me stuck. And it's learning to embrace the whole journey and accepting all of it. And I remember you and I had this conversation at the beginning of 2020, because, you know, a whole buzzword thing is like, everything happens for a reason. People love to say that until the shit hits the fan. It's like, okay, but everything's still happening for a reason. And it's about learning to be able to stand in your power and your truth, whether things are going well or not so well. And I feel like that's the work. And you've had that experience. And it doesn't mean, and something else I wanted to pick up on is, a lot of people believe that when they get somewhere, when they've done some certain things, then everything's like going to be butterfly and rainbows. And it's like, and again, I did that. And it's like, that also tripped me up. You said it, it's a journey. And yes. And I was going to say, like, you know, you're a shamanic healer, you're a channeler, you're a counselor, you're all of these things. Does that mean nothing ever happens to you? Does that mean that nothing's ever going to happen to you again?
Well, I'd like to think it wouldn't, but
it's not about what happens to you, it's about how you learn to deal with it, right? And I found that's the part, and how quickly you can then move through it. And that's the thing.
Yes, because when you get to that point of wisdom, you can move through things a lot quicker. Absolutely.
Or things don't bother you at all. It's just like, yeah, cool, okay, whatever.
And you and to be fair, you attract less toxicity the more work you do,
because it's like I find that it's like your what do they call it, your energetic boundaries are stronger and bigger. I was saying this to someone a couple of weeks ago. I'm like, I've noticed that certain people, they just won't, they know not to, or I've been in situations and it's like somebody's got the memo, like, don't fuck with her. It's like, I'm not available for it. Like, you can't come to me. And also, it's when I don't know, it's when I have certain conversations and I hear people sharing things, I'm like, oh shit, I forgot all this stuff happens, because it doesn't happen in my sphere.
In your world. Absolutely. I can't, sometimes I forget that there's so much shit still happening out there, because it's not happening in my world.
And drama, and I've watched a certain program. I was about to name it, but I'm not going to blow it up like that. Most people know what it is. It's a show on ITV that comes on about 9 o'clock of an evening, about twice a year. It does its series, and occasionally I'll sit there and watch it, and I'm just like, I don't.
You've lost me, because I don't watch normal TV. I don't even know what
you're not missing anything. Or it's okay. Another example: the news, or picking up a newspaper. And some of the stuff that you read, you're like, it's just so strange. But the more you go on this journey of personal growth and spiritual growth, the more you literally grow. And it's not our physical that grows, it's our spiritual, it's our energetic, and more stuff falls away, and it's beautiful. It's hard at times. You and I have had many conversations. So
absolutely,
I've known Angel, or I met her as Yvonne. You're gonna have to explain that, because that just sounds very, very strange to most people. So I met Angel as Yvonne I think like 10 years ago at a networking event, and
Yeah.
we've just stayed in touch all of this time, and I love you to pieces.
I
And
love you too.
thank you.
Aw.
And it's great to have you here and be having these conversations, because you know, you and I have these conversations on the regs. Like
Mhm.
we have talked about all sorts of things,
We have.
and more recently I've heard my inner voice saying these are the kind of conversations that people need to hear, like beyond
Mm.
the Instagram version of healing, and a quote that says this and da 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 da. And yeah, like what does it mean to be your ancestors' wildest dreams? It's all of that. So let's backtrack a bit. You were Yvonne, you're now Angel. Like, what on?
Walk on for that. Okay. So I changed my name in April this year, 2023, for a couple of reasons. I outgrew my name, Yvonne. And to be fair, I didn't really like that name anyway. But there was a couple of women in the spiritual arena, and one of them was a great friend of mine. And she was talking to someone else, her spiritual mentor. And her spiritual mentor said, "Who's that woman in a photo?" She said, "Oh, that's Yvonne." She said, "Not her name." And she looked and she said, "No, it isn't, is it? It the energy that I carry, the name Yvonne doesn't carry that name anymore. So our names have and carry energy." And so when I went to Zimbabwe, um, I I also asked my ancestors to give me my new name, because I was ready to give up that name anyway. Because as I said, I never liked it. I didn't like the story behind how it was given to me either. And they gave me my new name, Angel Abitha Chi, and I willingly accepted that name. And I've been going through a transition, holding the energy of that name, and it's a very powerful name to hold, and I feel quite honored to have that name. Mm.
Amazing. So I want to break it down again. Like, what does it actually mean to be an ancestor? I meant to ask you that when you were saying earlier, but what is an ancestor?
An ancestor. Ooh, the ancestral continuum is it's a continuum. Okay, so you have your grandmother, your great grandmother, your great great grandmother, your great 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 grand. Okay, and it just keeps going back until the
So
beginning of time.
they're your ancestors, like just basically grandparents and stuff.
They're your ancestors.
Okay.
But then also when you go way back to the very beginning of time,
Mhm.
or not begin the beginning of our existence, our ancestors were gods and goddesses.
Oh, yes. We've had conversations about this.
Right. So we reincarnate and we become ancestors and we just keep coming back. So you're an ancestor, I'm an ancestor. Our ancestors are us, and we are our ancestors. It's a
Mm.
continuum.
So so I did purposely name this episode, and the reason that I named it that is because with that thought in mind, that understanding, when you think back to even just very recently, so like maybe like your great grandparents, if you think about your great grandparents, the year they were born, the kind of conditions and environments they grew up in, and the things that they wanted that weren't available to them, maybe it wasn't even a conscious thought. And what you and I and all of those watching and listening have access to today, like that's mind blowing. You know,
Mm.
I don't know much about my great grandparents, but just looking at my grandparents. So on my mum's side, my grandmother was born in 1911. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
that's ancient. And so so she's lived through, or she did live through, two world wars, I believe I worked out, and there
Mm-hmm.
was other stuff in there. So years ago, when I was doing some money work, actually, somebody said, you know, if you think about the things that you've been taught about money and where it comes from, and look at your grandparents, and then just looking at that, it's like, wow, well, just taking 2 wars, for example, and that level of lack and fear and scarcity and all of the things, and that's been programmed into you. And that's just on one side, and you know what's then been taught to me. And then on the other side, my grandparents are from the Caribbean. They're from Jamaica. And historically, Jamaica was a very poor country. There's a lot of scarcity and lack and all of the things. So you think about all of these things coming in, and they've been taught to my parents and then taught to me either consciously or subconsciously. So the subconscious is, you know, in the actions, you know, I'm watching how my grandparents interact and talk about money. I'm soaking all of that up.
Soaking it all in, yes.
So then, like, all of the work that we're doing now, our ancestors are cheering us on. They're being like, yes, like, you're not living by, first of all, we're not just falling into life and just doing whatever and just I don't know. We're consciously thinking about stuff like, what do I want to create? What is my soul speaking to me? How do I want to live my life? Not just, well, you know, what did you say? You're 55. So at 55, you should be X, Y, and Z. You know, you should, a lot of people would like grow up, get a job, house, married, kids. That's it. Boom. And it's like, no.
I've always felt that I don't want to live a mediocre life. It didn't feel right for me. And I remember saying it to my friends, I'm not here to live a mediocre life. And I made sure that happened. That didn't happen. My life ain't mediocre at all. It's an amazing existence, what I experience, especially on a spiritual level, connecting with my ancestors and them being my cheerleaders, you know. And if we can connect to our ancestors, it's really powerful because they help us. We just need to be in that feminine energy to hear them.
So I was going to say, how would you encourage or invite someone to connect with their ancestors?
I suppose for somebody who hasn't connected with them at all yet, I would say maybe go and see a medium.
Okay.
Because the ancestors come through mediums, and then they will give you a message if they do come through, and then you can start asking your family more questions about grandma so and so and great grandma so and so. Just ask questions, do a family tree perhaps, and start seeing who they are.
I'm laughing because I always say the Caribbean's doing a family tree. It's just
that's hard. That's not always very easy.
And also there's usually a lot of secrets that come up in that, a lot of children that nobody knew existed, or maybe
I know
it's always funny. So when you were saying like about a medium, it reminded me that, so over the past couple of months, I connected with quite a lot of different women. They were women not because men were excluded, but because the pool that I invited them from was a women's membership. And when I was speaking to a lot of them, it was really, really interesting. A lot of them don't describe themselves as spiritual. But as I was going through my questions and questions were coming through me, and I had some prepared already, we got around things that were about spirituality. And literally, I kid you not, about 8 out of 10 of them all told me they had gifts. Like one of them full on, like, has some really powerful experiences. Another one was like, I used to hear stuff and, you know, I don't anymore, because they've experienced it, but then they shut it down because they were scared. And I'm guessing also, because I wanted to say to you when you were saying about like your life's not mediocre, like, did people ever think you were weird, or did you ever feel different? Because I feel I've had that in my journey, and I know a lot of people that have, and that also can push you back into mediocrity, because when you're in a group of people and you're doing something different, like that straying from the pack kind of thing, it's very easy to retreat, isn't it?
Retreat, you know. And so, and it's so interesting, because I think there's a lot of people out there who don't realize that they have spiritual gifts, and I think most of humanity have spiritual gifts to varying degrees. actually. We all have a sixth sense for sure, all of us. And so for me, because of the way I was brought up, my gifts were quite dormant, I think. There are a few occasions where I can remember certain things happening, couldn't explain them, and I just probably, I don't even think I talked about them. But also, food was very important in my family. A lot of women in my family, we were overweight, and food was actually one of the things that suppressed my gifts. And I didn't realize this until I came out of the church, and I spoke to a woman, and no, a couple of people. You have strong gifts, but you dumb it down with food. And I was like, oh, okay. And it's so interesting that I went to rehab, and my main addiction was food. And so after that, things really started. Not even after that, even before that, actually. No, what am I talking about? Yeah, after that, things really started to come to the fore for me. In terms of my spiritual gifts started growing. And in fact, one of my great grandmothers started coming to me quite often, and I'd never met her. And I was born after she passed, but she was like really rooting for me to wake up spiritually. And I just went on the journey and started getting insatiable appetite for all things spiritual, books and oracle cards and all sorts. And it felt like it mainly happened in 2011, 2012. Felt like I just woke up, like literally woke up.
I think a lot of people can relate to that, and it may not be food, but there'll be something even. And the reason that I started off on this thread was because you were saying about mediums, and my point was a lot of people are mediums themselves and don't fully own it and believe it. Hence the reason I was sharing, when I was speaking to these women, how many of them have these gifts that they've shut down through whatever reason. And I also see a lot of labeling at the moment going on. ADHD, anxiety. There's something else, I can't remember the name, but all of those kind of things. And my theory, my belief is that these spiritual gifts that, like you said, we all have, some of us are just stronger than others, and they're being awoken because there's all of this. So we were talking about this before I hit record, the Schumann, or you might have mentioned it.
Yes,
the Schumann resonance, which is basically, how would you describe the Schumann resonance? I'd say it's the weather reporting for the energy of the world.
And the heartbeat of the earth. Like, I need to look more into it actually, because I find it very fascinating. But the earth is going through, but I've always said the earth is going through a massive cleansing. It's going through a cycle, and it's ascending. And because we are inhabitants of the earth, we need to keep up with her. That's why we're going through this as well.
So when the Schumann resonance is high, the energy is like this. It's very fast moving, and we are feeling that, we're sensing that. And for those of us that don't understand this part of us, this high vibration thing looks and feels like anxiety. It looks and feels like ADHD.
Let me tell you something. I used to suffer with anxiety, right? I realize now it was my intuition and it was my energy connecting to planet Earth and what was going on. I looked at a list for Asperger's in women and all the different things it says about Asperger. I looked at the list and I thought, I'm not putting that label because I'm just highly spiritually gifted. That is who I am. I'm not owning those labels.
And I think that's something really powerful. So I've said recently, like, if I went to a doctor, I would probably be labeled with 10 things. I don't do doctors. I'm not about to be labeled. I'm not about to have that. I was speaking to a friend recently, and her son believes he has ADHD. And for him, he wants to have that label, not as a label, but as an understanding. It's he's a male, logical brain. They want to understand things to help him make sense of how he's feeling. But we're both very similar, me and his mum, and we were saying, I said, don't allow that to be, and what's like an inhibitant in don't let it stop him from doing stuff.
Yes.
Like that label
Yes.
define him. She was like, oh no, we're not doing that. She said, I'm happy to support him in, you know, understanding. She said, but I'm not, he won't be doing any of that. Well, I've got ADHD. So, and yeah, I feel like there's a lot of that going on at the moment.
There's too much of it.
Too much. And actually, could it be that it's not that? Not everything needs to be solved with a pill.
Absolutely.
Or a diagnosis. And also, I have family members and a friend who has a lot of people in her family with things like Asperger's as well. And I've always, my thought is always been that there's a spiritual thing to that. I feel like, and we were having a conversation, me and my friend, so her brother has Asperger's or something like that, and we were saying how they're like, it's almost like they're stuck between two worlds, like the physical and the spiritual, because they're very, very intelligent.
This is the
and
thing.
They know so much.
I live between two worlds. I live in the physical world and I live in the spiritual world. That's who I am. And because I accept that as that's how I operate on this planet, I don't need to accept any of these labels. And I always, when I meet clients and they think they're ADHD, they think they're borderline personality, or they think they're this, I always refer them to check out this link. You could be an empath, you could be an indigo child, you could be a star child, you could be a crystal child. Just check out the link and see if any of those resonate with you.
Yes.
And then it often it does. That's who you are. Now let's work from that premise as opposed to the label, because the label limits you. Other stuff, it amplifies you. It doesn't limit you. It tells you are a spiritual being having a human experience. And it's a different one from someone else who doesn't have that. So it's about embracing all of our gifts, because so many of us are here with our superpowers. And the system, the matrix, wants to dumb you down, doesn't want you to realize how powerfully spiritually gifted you are.
Yeah. And I love what you said, you know, it's about what resonates with you, because there are genuine conditions out there, like, don't get it twisted, saying that they don't exist. There are certain personality types, for example, which is what came up when you were saying that are like, certain personality types don't need to be reading that stuff and mistaking their bullshit for, oh, I'm an empath. No, you're really not. You have a personality disorder, and that's, you know, and that's that. You know, there's a space for everything in life. Everything happens for a reason.
Right.
But it's about what resonates. You know, you have this, you're a soul in a body, and you know when you read something, that feeling of that's for me. It's the same feeling that when you meet someone and you don't know why it is, but something just doesn't feel right.
Absolutely.
The same experience when you meet someone and you're like, yeah, I feel like I've known you my whole life. You're my soulmate. Yeah. And soulmate doesn't just, a lot of people think soulmate is just about romantic love, and actually it's not. It's not. A soulmate can be a child, it can be a pet, it can be a friend, it can be anyone. And we could have a whole conversation about all of that, because
that's another one. That's another one. But what I did want to say is one of the greatest philosophies of all time is know thyself. Know thyself. So it's so important for us to really explore the inner workings of who we are on a soul level and on a human level. Explore who you are so that you know how to operate and know how to look after yourself in this world.
And that, I think, is a beautiful place to bring it to an end.
I can't believe the time has gone so quickly.
I know. And I could carry on talking for ages and ages, but I'm like, no. And we're going to do this within the hour.
Yes.
So
I'll come back.
And we will, because, you know, there's lots of conversations we can have. So thank you so much, Angel. I'm going to leave all of your details and how people can contact you and find out what healings and things you can do, how you can work with them. I'll leave all of that in the caption to this video. If there is anything else you want to share before we close out?
No, that's it. just be loving towards yourself, like, to everyone. That's what I'm saying. Because love is the greatest energy there is. And this is the love revolution, you know. So just remember that love. Yeah.
Thank you. And I want to say, to remind you that you are made for more, and whatever the desires that are inside of you, they're there for a reason. And your work is to make yourself available for them. And that's really what this journey of personal and spiritual growth and healing is about. It's about becoming the person that's a match for the things that you desire, because they're in you for a reason, they're available, and you can have it all. So thank you very much for being here. Leave us a comment, like, subscribe, do all the things. And if you have a specific question, leave it down there in the comments, and I'll do my best to get back to it. Thank you very much. Big love. Mwah.